Now from Richmond Brothers, CEO and co-owner, Matt Kerfman. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Bart.
Good to see you.
It's nice to be seen.
Yeah, and you can see even better now because the last time you were here, you weren't wearing glasses.
Right. You're right. You're very, I'm like your astute listener who called in. No, you're like the astute listener because you're right. I didn't have glasses last time I was here.
Well, being a glasses wearer, I noticed that about people.
I had gone out to dinner and met a friend, and they had digital menus. And then they had a menu like way up on the board, and I couldn't read it. And my friend said, "Hey, try these out." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it's crystal clear. I need to go get an eye exam." So
wow.
Did that and nearsighted. So it's kind of reading things far away, but very big change for me.
How many fingers am I holding up?
0.
I was at an eye test with my wife the other day, and it's all digital. It's monitors instead of the old cardboard charts.
Okay,
All right, so we've had a lot of things going on financially.
Sure.
In the economy. We've got the Fed raising the interest rates again last week, and I think the news has really startled a lot of people. The failure of SVB Bank in California, and then a couple more banks since then, even a Swiss bank.
Yeah.
Are you worried at all about the safety of our money in banks right now?
So it's a really good question. This was probably about 3-4 weeks ago, right around first 2 weeks of March when that happened, and it arguably was the first major, when you look at bank failures, since the 2008 financial crisis. So it's certainly for those of us who were either retired or invested and kind of lived through that scary time, it immediately brings back thoughts of that, September, October, November timeline in 08. I would say, at least from our perspective, the bank got taken over by the FDIC on a Friday, and by Sunday, the FDIC had announced that they were backstopping the depositors. Now, there's a pretty big delineation because SVB was a publicly traded bank. So they had shareholders and bondholders and investors. So there were some people who did lose everything that they had there, but they were on the investment side of it because they got taken over by the FDIC. But if you had deposits, so checking, savings, for example, then I would say from an individual's perspective, the FDIC system worked. And by Monday, those people were able to start accessing their checkings or savings. I actually know someone who, a female who has a small business out there, and I think of her because there's a lot of small businesses here in Jackson. And if I were using a bank like that to fund my payroll, and payroll's every 2 weeks, what would you do as a small business if you couldn't access your funds to make payroll in 2 weeks? So it wasn't just the big banks or big investment firms or technology companies. There was a lot of just normal everyday people who had money in those banks too. So from that perspective, I'm not worried. I am glad that the system worked because that can cause a lot of fear. If the banking system is at risk, what about everything else? It kind of starts this maybe snowballing effect psychologically in the financial world.
So what would you say overall the health of our nation's economy right now at this point in time?
It's a mixed bag right now, and part of it is you look at consumers, look at the individual, and by and large, the data suggests that consumers in our society are doing reasonably well. And what I mean by that is unemployment is still pretty low. And even though we're starting to see maybe some bigger companies with layoffs or downsizing, it's not at a massive scale. It's not bringing unemployment from 2, 3, or 4% up to 8 or 10%. And a lot of people are out of work. And a large percentage of our economic engine is based on how the consumer is doing. So do we have income? Do we have ability to pay our bills and meet our obligations? And so that's generally about 2/3 of our economy. I'm not saying everywhere is perfect, and I'm not saying every individual is perfect, but the way I use an analogy is if every morning, let's say I get up and I weigh myself on a broken scale. Well, if the scale's broken, but I get a measurement off that scale, and then every morning I reweigh myself on the same broken scale. If you're comparing on that scale, then I would say that that's still a good tool. Whether we need a new scale or we need a new measuring tool, that's another question for another day. But in general, consumers seem to be relatively healthy, and so with the banking system backstopped and the Federal Reserve raising interest rates, you mentioned on our break, 0.25 again. So eventually those higher increases benefit those who are savers. What I mean by that is you can get money market accounts now, your CD rates, 1 and 2 year treasury rates, so obligations of the U.S. government, you can find anywhere from 3, 4, maybe 5%. And a couple of years ago, it was almost nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, zero. So eventually, even though raising those rates and trying to combat inflation creates somewhat of a financial hurricane, think about it, kind of a financial storm all around us, but as the dust settles, historically that would be a good place to be if you're a saver, if you're a retiree. Where it's hard is if you're a borrower. So if you needed to go take a loan out to buy a car or a new mortgage, new mortgage rates used to be 3%. Now that was historically low and not normal by any stretch of the imagination, but there's a whole group of society that's all they've ever known. So seeing rates now anywhere between 5, 6, or 7% can make that more challenging. So, but in general, it's, I guess for the type of client that we work with and how are we addressing that question, is the economy on stable footing and stable ground? The answer is going to be, it depends on where you're at or who you are in the economy. There are certainly pockets that are not doing well. And just kind of having, again, that balanced approach. And it also depends on if you're a saver, meaning you're still working and you're adding into your retirement plans, your 401ks, and you have a paycheck, versus if you're a retiree and you're no longer adding to that pot. There's two different paths you might need to look at as far as what do you do. And you and I talked about FDIC amounts, and jokingly, but the limits are basically $250,000 per bank, and the same for the NCUA for credit unions, which we have some great credit unions in the Jackson area too.
So the federal government pretty much set the standard and telegraphed what would happen if it happened again.
Yeah.
That, hey, you guys helped out SVB,
Yeah.
we expect the same help.
Yep, and I think it does set a bit of a precedent, and I would actually take that a little deeper and say they helped out the individuals who had deposits at those banks. The investors, I'm sure there's going to be investigations that follow with leadership and probably executives and how that all came about. But I would say it's a good reminder that the system is working.
Another part of the Silicon Valley Bank was the place it's at in Northern California, where there were, in the tech industry, a lot of mass layoffs. Insane amounts, 10,000 people laid off from Facebook, thousands from Twitter, eBay, Amazon. They're laying off people left and right.
Sure.
without really any care or concern for these people. It's just horrible the way they treat people. So we in Jackson, we have a much more diversified economy. And you were born here, so you lived through those years that were tough on automotive manufacturing, because we were very heavy on that.
All the suppliers that go to the big three.
But there might be people who have, even here in Jackson, there are some companies that have downsized.
Yeah.
So people that end up getting laid off, that are maybe at a point in life that they're not going to work again.
Yeah.
What kind of advice do you have for those folks?
Yeah, it's a great question. So if things do start to slow down a little bit economically, and certainly in this market and generally in this area, you hear a little bit about, early separation packages or layoff or severance are some key terms. And so if you're maybe already 55 or 56 or 58, and maybe not to your ideal retirement age, but now you have to fast forward that decision and have those discussions, we've created a free resource that is available, and I think you guys have the link, but it's also on our website, richmondbrothers.com. Just about some short-term decisions, if you're plunged into that, if you're one of those people, that you need help and you need some resources to say, okay, what do I have to do with my finances to determine, what do I do with an old 401k? What if I have a pension? What if I have a 403b? How do I set myself up for now the next stage of life, which could be, if you're not going back to work, retirement. I call it the decumulation of assets. So it's a very different path, we believe, than when you were accumulating. And so we created a resource with some questions and just some free information, because there probably is going to continue to be more of that, hopefully not on a major scale, but even in pockets with companies that are cutting back, it's always out there. So we want to have a resource for this community at least.
Just be prepared. I mean, it could happen to anybody at any time.
Absolutely.
All right, so I want to have you pass along a couple of events that
Sure.
are coming up. One, and I think you've done this several times in the past, a shredding party.
Yeah.
And it's not just it's not just an event; it's a party.
There you go. We're going to host so we wanted to get past the tax season for 2022, which comes up here mid-April, and then host a big event. If you've ever seen the big Shred It truck, it's kind of a big dump truck, if you will, and you can come bring your documents, and we host an event at our office, which is at the Jackson Airport, the Richmond Brothers hangar. It's right next to the airport administration office. So you can see it from Wildwood, but we host an event. We have one or two food trucks usually come out, and we would encourage the community, if you're able to come out, to register. We first have it set up, availability for our clients, and if you have those old files and old sensitive tax documents, you can actually see them being dumped in the bin, so they are shredded and immediately
People, they
removed.
want to see that too, don't they?
Psychologically,
Yeah.
and I want to see it's fun to see, and so we just try to have a nice event. Hopefully we have good weather, but that's going to be on Friday, May 5th, and I believe it starts at 11 o'clock, and there is a link if you go to richmondbrothers.com. There's an attend an event link at the very top, kind of in the band, and you can go and register. We just need to get a sense of how many people might plan on coming so we can plan accordingly, but that would be open to first our clients, but then the community at large as well.
And you've got a food truck, plus you're helping a nonprofit.
There you go. So the first $500 raised that day, we will match that and go to a local nonprofit. And Kira, our marketing director at Richmond Brothers, usually surveys and kind of gets a sense of what our team at Richmond Brothers would like to see funds go to, and do a quick internal survey and go from there.
Nice. And this year it is the Jackson Community Food Pantry.
There you go.
The community has seen the results of cybercrime this past year, the ISD hack, which who knows how much it cost, but it certainly disrupted the lives of thousands of people in our community. And every day, that's one manifestation of cybercrime, but there's a lot of other ways that people can be had, right?
Sure. Yeah, so there's a lot of risk that can come out there with online, but so knowing the best way to not only set up passwords, but just how to set yourself up so that you're hopefully not under the guise of that happening. It's certainly not completely avoidable because so much is online. So we each year, we've done this before with different types of experts in this field, but we have connected with a former FBI agent and who worked in cybercrime, and so we're going to host a virtual event. And again, virtual meaning you can log in on your computer, kind of like a Zoom sort of session, so you don't have to physically show up. But we'll be doing that, and I believe you have the date written there. Is it April 24th on a Monday at 6:30? And that's also on our website, richmondbrothers.com. Hit attend an event, and that'll be on there for registration. And as a virtual event, we can host a lot more. So just keys, tips, tricks, if you will, to try to make sure you're set up in the best way possible with everything that happens in the online world nowadays.
Yeah, it's so easy to be victimized, and I'm sure it's everyone, even if they don't know it, it's probably happened.
It's happened, and we hear it time and time again, especially from retirees There's also Social Security scams. There's all kinds of things
There
coming
should
up.
be a special place in hell for these
I
perpetrators.
I agree. You know, sometimes people will go to file their taxes, and their tax returns will get rejected. And they get rejected because someone has stolen their identity and already filed in advance to try to get their refund. So there's all sorts of screwy things out there. So we want to make sure we put out a resource for our clients and especially retirees, and then others in our community that can just, you know, learn more and be educated on those topics.
Well, we always appreciate all your expertise and all the great things that Richmond Brothers does for our community.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming in.
Appreciate it. Good to see you, Bart.
Good to see you, Matt.
Appreciate it.
Matt Kerfman, CEO and co-owner of Richmond Brothers Financial Advisors here in Jackson.